So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Eazy Conversations. I just want to start off by saying thanks a lot to everyone who listened to the last episode featuring the homie Matt and I. I hope you enjoyed listening to us do our fantasy movie draft with our dream casts. If you haven't had a chance to check that one out, go back. It was a lot of good fun, and if you like that, we'll try to incorporate that concept a few more times down the road with different topics, of course. So now for episode 84 of Eazy Conversations. I'm extremely excited, of course, to be back in the studio virtually with the homie Matt. Say what's up to the people.
What's going on, everybody? Hope everyone's having a good time right now. Thanks for everyone for listening to the last episode as well. Very excited tonight for tonight's episode. Our guest reached out to us, and it's going to be something that I like. We're going to be talking about stuff that I know virtually nothing about. But Eric, without further ado, just let us introduce our guest for us.
Yeah, that's a ditto for me too, Matt. Extremely excited to bring on an old family friend of mine. Reached out to us recently to get this going. We tried to link up a few times in the past, didn't work out. It's all good. God works in mysterious ways, but we're making this work tonight. So we're bringing on, like I said, old friend of mine who will be talking to us about his work in the group home setting as a key worker, I believe. So, ladies and gentlemen, introducing to the podcast the homie Dallas Dunne. Say what's up to the people.
Yeah, hello everybody. Happy to be on the pod.
Super happy to have you, Dallas. And so just going to dive right into it. Seeing as this is a topic that Matt and I really are not well versed in, I thought a good place for us to start would be to talk about your background and where the interest came from to work in the group home setting as a key worker, as you mentioned to me via text. What is a key worker, and why did you decide to pursue this career path?
Yeah, so I'll tackle the titles first because I think that's a huge spectrum within every single agency that you work with. We have different terminology, different titles for everything. So in the current setting I'm in right now with Burncroft Residential Services, we use the term key worker, and that just describes like a 2-client key worker. So I'm like their primary caregiver. I book their appointments. I deal with lawyers. I'm the first guy that their guardians go to. I develop their quarterly progress reports. They are my primary focus. Whereas I'm working in a residential setting with 6 clients that live here, there are 2 that are my primary focus. In other group homes, you'll have the title like primary caregiver, etc. So that's the whole title fiasco. And then the background, how I got into it was, I think like a lot of people that get into this field, they start out volunteering. And for me, it started back in high school when I volunteered with Best Buddies during my lunch period. It was just kind of like a fun thing to do. My girlfriend at the time did it as well. She was a very nice girl, and she did a bunch of volunteer activities, and she introduced me to Best Buddies, and it was so fun. I took it like a duck takes to water. I just got in there and found out that all these kids just wanted to have fun and wanted to play games, and it was really cool for me because at the time I was working in a daycare. So it was a familiar setting for me, and just really interesting. And then that sparked an interest, which turned into a roaring flame. And from there, I went on to continue in childcare, in daycares, summer camps, hockey camps. And then from there, I went on to college, and I went into developmental service work. And developmental service work, what it is also like the whole title fiasco. It's a huge spectrum. So in my field, which can be summed up as group home work, if you want to call it that, it doesn't really have like a set term. You can either be a DSW, which is a developmental service worker, where you're kind of working in like rehabilitating motor functioning skills, or making sure that people with disabilities maintain their motor functioning skills. And also sometimes their social motor skills. It also teaches you about intertubular feeding. So that's for total care. And what total care is when there's somebody that's completely completely disabled, and they're stuck to either a wheelchair, or they're stuck to a bed, like a medical bed. And then we go into the PSW aspect, which is a personal support worker. And a personal support worker is somebody that's just a caregiver, essentially. And they're there to take care of whatever needs to be done. Normally hygiene, routine, cooking, cleaning, keeping them out of harm's way. And then we get into more my setting, which is a residential counselor or a behavioral counselor. So the clientele I work with, they're all high functioning. They're all capable of maintaining their hygiene. They're all capable of cleaning their rooms, etc. Although I have worked in those settings as well. I started out in those settings. But as you gain more experience and you gain more competence, you start to work in these settings where it's more dangerous, but it's more rewarding, because the progress is observable. You get to see it, whereas like in those other settings, it's kind of just maintaining as they age. But in this dynamic, it's more observable in terms of, I get to give them feedback and give them advice on something, and I get to see it flourish the next day when I notice them developing better habits and better routines. And so what we work off here is called ABA, and that's applied behavioral analysis. So how it works is we'll observe a behavior that happens throughout the day, and we'll write it down in our observations in their respective data binders. Each client has their own data binders. And so we'll write about it in their observations. And then from there, I'll bring it, the two other key workers, who one of them is a senior residential counselor, and then the supervisor will meet with a clinician, a residential clinician, and the program manager. And we'll bring up, okay, listen, Billy or whoever is doing this behavior. He's let's say he's talking to a wall every day. Okay, that's abnormal behavior for Billy. Normally he doesn't talk to walls. So we write it down as obs, and then we bring it to a meeting. Okay, we call it clinical, we call it consult, but we bring it to the clinician. And so we go to consult and we bring this up, and then from there, okay, this keeps happening. This happens every week. Okay, let's turn it into a BA. So a BA is a behavior analysis. And then so that's where we really dive into it. So every time he talks to the wall, now we go by ABC data, which is antecedent, behavior, and consequence. So now we're talking about, okay, so what's the antecedent? How did it get to the point where he started talking to that wall? What happened before that? Who was there during that behavior? And then we talk about the behavior itself. What did he say to the wall? And so we follow up on that. And then finally, the consequence. How did staff respond to Exhibit A talking to the wall, right? And so from there, then we can go, okay, this keeps happening when this is around or that's around. We kind of figure out how it catalyzes. And then from that point, we turn it into a BSP, which is a behavior support plan. And we're able to instill a routine that rewards him when he doesn't talk to walls. And it's essentially a form of operant conditioning. And we get to condition this client to extinct these maladaptive behaviors. And extinction is just a psychological term used for when you have a behavior that you normally do, but then you don't because you've been conditioned not to. You get rewarded when you don't talk to walls. So now I don't want to talk to walls. They might not consciously know why they don't want to talk to walls anymore, but they definitely do enjoy consciously the reward they get for not talking to walls. And so at that point, once we've established that BSP and they're consistently succeeding, and this is what I talk about when it's observable, it's practical, you get to really do it. At that point, we just turn it into a routine, and it just goes into like his helpful hints, and then that's for new staff to come in and understand that routine and understand that behavior, and who that client is as a person. But it's way more hands-on, it's way more high functioning, it's way more rewarding. And I've done the PSW, I've done the DSW, I've sat there with paraplegic and done his physio of bringing his leg from his stomach outwards, to maintain, to avoid muscular atrophy. I've done the atypical autistic 6'4" kid who just completely crapped his pants and started eating it and putting it on you. I've done the restraints 4 times a day. I've done the suppository PRNs. I've done everything there is to do in this field, and this is by far the most rewarding, hands down.
Okay.
Yeah.
You said a lot in there, Dallas. I feel like that was a master class in like breaking down all the titles and responsibilities. And I was gonna ask, like, where do you see yourself going on? You mentioned a spectrum of, like, there's a lot of different areas that you could specialize in. And it sounds like you've kind of found your area of expertise where you wanted to get to, and like don't really strive to get anywhere else. Is that correct? Or are you? I understand you're still studying as well. Like, are you also trying to get to another level?
Yeah, so I'm currently doing a BA at Carleton in psychology. But listen, sky's the limit, right? I think you should always, no matter what profession you're in, always strive for more.
Mm-hmm.
Regardless of how satisfied you think you might be. But even then, like, the hierarchy here is like, I could, you're supposed to want to, from key worker, go to SRC, senior residential counselor, and then from there go to supervisor, and then from there go to program manager, or something else, or HR or something.
Mm-hmm.
But for me personally, no, like, I want to pursue something, with people who don't have disabilities and people who are higher functioning and who maybe deal with depression, anxiety, more common mental illnesses that I think are really prevalent now. And I did mention in a text to you how COVID had affected everybody, and how I think that, that's definitely a talking point, is because we're seeing a skyrocket of mental illnesses throughout society, of people with depression, social anxiety, also substance abuse disorders. So I don't know. I want to do something. I'm not sure what I really want to specialize in yet, but I definitely know that I just want to keep helping people because it's so rewarding. It gives me so much in life.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I've loved to do ever since I was in high school, when I started Best Buddies, when I started working at Ray Friel before and after care, or Ray Friel summer camps with the city of Ottawa. But also I would love to teach psychology as well. I could talk about psychology all day. It's kind of an obsession. So like I said, sky's the limit. I don't know where I'm going to go, but I know wherever I land, it'll be nice.
Okay.
Well said. I got a question for you, Dallas. Like, for
Yeah.
someone who'd be interested,
Hit me, Matt.
If someone interested in this line of work, like, what would you tell them? Like, what's the biggest attribute or quality that you need to become like a PSW, or like in your line of work? Like, what would you say are the biggest things you need? Patience and a really good routine. I think those are the two most important attributes for sure. Most important virtues. You need a good routine, because if you don't have a good routine, and I'm not talking about like, I get up at 7 and I go to bed at 10 routine. I'm talking about you need good sleep, you need good diet, you need good exercise. You need to be the best version of yourself you can be, because those setbacks or those things that you're lacking are going to drag you down, because you're going to keep feeding into those addictions or those maladaptive behaviors that you have, because this job is really stressful. And so how you deal with that stress defines your longevity in your career here. So what I do is I use, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with the term coined by Sigmund Freud. It's called sublimation. And so sublimation, what it is essentially is it's just an avenue for you to take your stress and put it somewhere, because regardless, it's going to boil over. It's going to come out. And so if that stress comes out, it's, for example, the common example is like a guy goes to work and he gets yelled at by his boss. He can't yell back at his boss because he's going to get fired, right? So he internalizes it, and then he goes home and his dog barks and he kicks the dog. And even though it's complete overreaction, but he's taking out that anger and he's displacing it onto the dog. So sublimation would be more the beneficial approach, which would be like, you go home, the dog's barking, you internalize that as well, and then you go to the gym and you work out and you get it out in the gym, or you go paint a beautiful picture
and you get it out painting a beautiful picture, or you go watch your favorite movie and you get it out watching your favorite movie, or you play music. The list goes on. There are tons of tactics that you can use to sublimate that stress and to get it out of your system. And I think that's a strategy that everybody can use every day in life.
Wow, great answer.
Yeah.
I do the same thing now. It's like frustration gets all like taken out at the gym for me, and then when I'm done, it's all like gone, and there's no point. Like,
you feel so good. You feel elated.
Yeah.
You feel completely elated.
Controlling your emotions for me, and I think about that every time I have an interaction at work. Like, just compose yourself.
Yeah, listen, if you have a hairpin trigger, you will not last long in this industry whatsoever. You won't even last a month, because you know, these kids, and some of them are kids. All of the well, one of them's a kid that lives here, but all the others are adults. And listen, like I've worked, you know, with low functioning. I've worked with all ages. I've worked with children. Some of them are adorable when you first meet them, you know, and it's kind of, I think I'm speaking for a lot of PSWs, DSWs, residential counselors, behavioral counselors, etc. When I say that they get annoyed when they go with their client or their participant or their patient, whatever term, that's another term, that's a spectrum. But when they go with their clients in public and people come up to their client, they go, "Oh, you're so cute," like, and they feed into all these maladaptive behaviors of like narcissism or, you know, whatever this client has, which is gonna spiral into something else later in the day because they have all this energy and all this attention that they had throughout the day. And you're like, "No, please, like, don't feed into it. Like, you're just making him like energetic and making him redevelop these bad behaviors." And so, you know, these kids, they are cute, but you can't treat them like they're kids or like they're stuffed animals, you know, because they're not. What they are, they're work in progress is what they are, you know. So I think it helps to develop that patience over time to overcome that, for sure.
So yeah, you mentioned that you were the primary caregiver for 2 of these 6. I mean, I don't know if they're all kids there. You said that most of them are adults there.
One is kid, yeah.
In your the group home, what is the age range that you typically see, and like how difficult is that, I guess, to be that primary caregiver for these people who need that, who have that hole in their lives, I guess, are missing on the primary caregiving side? Do you kind of like form that relationship with them where you kind of see them as maybe your kid? Am I way off here? Because my experience with like group homes really stems from like the movie Short Term 12 is like the most. I don't know if you've seen that movie there, and I kind of saw that as like it's a group home where the kids leave when they're 18 years old, but it sounds like there are kids who
Short Term 12?
Short Term 12, yeah.
Now, okay, so you're completely right. I think from what I'm assuming Short Term 12 is, it sounds like you're describing it pretty well, but it is just like that. If the government deems that person competent, so it's all up to the ministry's discretion. So they will send somebody in, a social worker or a psychologist, psychiatrist, etc., and they will analyze if that client or that person is competent. And once they do turn 18, they do have the option to leave. So I'm assuming that's what short-term 12 is it's foster kids or et cetera, or kids with, you know, delinquency issues, and they're in group homes, and then once they turn 18, they leave, or they make the choice to leave or not. Am I?
I forget, Matt, if they have a choice to leave or not. It's from what I remember, once they turn 18, they kind of have to move out, is what I'm remembering.
Move on to a different, yeah.
Yeah.
You have to either get transferred or they're deemed adequate. Like, it's been a while since I watched the movie too, Eric.
I've never seen it. It sounds great. Like,
it's a great movie.
Put it on my watch list. But it is similar to that. So, for example, one of our clients, he's 17, but he'll be turning 18 this year, I think. And he'll make that decision. He'll meet with his social worker, and he'll make that decision of, like, do I want to stay in this group home or not? But afterwards, where he goes, I mean, it's going to be either a similar setting like this, or maybe more semi-independent. I'm assuming it would be more semi-independent, and then they would kind of land him a job and get him to be completely self-sufficient. And from there, he would live a completely independent lifestyle. But for us, for my clientele mainly, they're not deemed competent. They're either serious offenders criminally. We have some clients who have done GTA. We have some clients who have done pedophilia, rape, sexual assault. So some pretty serious material here. And they're just not deemed competent, and not because of those crimes, because I'm sure, as you guys are all familiar with the case of Vincent Lee in 2015, when he beheaded a man on the Greyhound bus and cannibalized him, and he was deemed not criminally responsible due to a mental disorder. And he was recently released, I think, maybe in 2019 or something. But yeah, that's an example of a person who's done a horrible crime, but was eventually given independence to live a fulfilling lifestyle without the restraints of a group home or a mental health facility monitoring them on a constant basis.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have another question, Dallas, for you. What's the what fine line do you have to play within pertaining to getting, how attached do you get to these people and stay on the outside because eventually they might leave, and and taking work home with you, are you, how much does it affect you in your home life? Do you get frustrated if you have where's the balance in all this?
Oh, it's such a delicate balance. That's such a great question, Matt. It is such a delicate balance the whole time. Like I said, if you're lacking in any other department within your life, then most of the time you're just going to teeter over. So let's say I smoke cigarettes, for example, which I don't. But let's say I do. I start working here, I guarantee you I'm going to start smoking twice as much. Because that's an area, a department where I'm kind of weak in, and I allow myself, that's one of my vices. So you're not allowed many vices if you work in this industry, is what I'm illustrating. Because if you do, those vices are going to eventually take over, and you're going to develop an issue. Which is the case with a lot of, my past coworkers, and a lot of people who do work in this industry. What was your first question, Matt, again? Oh, yeah, developing the attachment. So I think I used to develop an attachment, but it didn't last long. I think within the first week, the client punches you in the face, and you immediately realize, this is not like a stuffed animal, like I said, but when people meet your client on a first day basis, where they just meet them for the first time, they treat them like a little kid, and they think they're innocent, and they think they're harmless. But in most cases, they're not. There's a reason they're in care. And it's called a group home because these clients are grouped together for similar behavioral tendencies. So in my house, and in most cases in most group homes, the big guys, the big staff, are put into the most dangerous houses because we're the most capable. And that's nothing against women working in the industry. They are fantastic, and they dominate the industry. I think it's 80% to 20%, and they do a fantastic job. But it's just a dangerous environment. We've had women who have come and worked with our clientele, and in most cases, they're attacked. And, it's just unnecessary to put them in harm's way. But anyway, to get back on track, you do develop a connection briefly, but if you work with that client for long enough, you almost immediately realize, oh, okay, this person is capable of some very dangerous stuff, and I need to treat this as serious as possible, or else I'm at risk of endangering myself.
So it definitely sounds like you've been in... Go ahead, Matt.
Are you always, so that seems super stressful. I'd always have be kind of on high alert. Don't let my guard down. You might, do you always have to have some sort of guard up, Dallas, or just mental readiness, or even physical readiness sometimes?
Matt, I'm not sure if Eric's told you or anything, but I did some boxing. I used to be a boxer. I did a bit of boxing. I'm not even sure if Eric knew.
No, I knew rugby. I'm pretty sure too, right? You played rugby at a somewhat high level.
obviously hockey
Yeah.
as well. I played a lot of hockey, so the roughest sports essentially. And so over time in these sports, you develop kind of this alpha male mentality of like, I'm the king of the hill, and so I think it's in Avatar, James Cameron's Avatar, Canadian legend, James Cameron, but I think it's in Avatar when the main character says, he's talking about the biggest bird, and he says, if I was the biggest bird, why would I look up? Why would I look behind my back, etc. That's the mentality I have, is that I don't really worry behind my back, and it's a dangerous mentality at the same time because I could easily be attacked. But I feel, and this is just a theory, but I feel like if I have that mentality and I have that confidence, it's exuded off of me, and they get that mentality that I am, in charge, and I'm strong enough to be invincible, and they kind of believe that a little bit. And but of course, mainly, Matt, I think this is the most honest answer to your question. Every client in a group home setting like this will test you at least once. And once they realize that it results in, in them being restrained, then they immediately are conditioned to understanding the hierarchy. And they understand that it's just not going to work out for them. And so they just don't try again, typically. And these guys aren't hitting the gym 5 times a week either, so it's not like they're feeling tough or anything and they think they can take you. It's usually just some emotional baggage that they've built up, and then they end up displacing it onto you or something. So yeah, honestly, like these guys don't have the energy to go 12 rounds. So it usually happens once, and then once they know, okay, this just doesn't go my way, that doesn't work, I can't take Dallas. So then they just usually don't try again. Sometimes they do though, and that sucks because you do get sucker punched in the face. Which I have been, like, can't even count how many times.
So again, kind of bringing it back to what Matt asked earlier there about like advice for people getting into this field, and maybe for some who aren't necessarily big bird alpha dogs, just the just person running the show, how would you recommend them to prepare themselves for these situations where they'll definitely need to deal with conflict, like physical altercations? Do you often, like, I'm assuming you do there, but rely on your other coworkers, like in your house, as a support system? Like, how well do you work off one another in some of those situations?
Great intuition there. You do definitely rely off your coworkers the majority of the time, for sure. I like to think that I'd be okay without my coworkers as well, but you need your coworkers. In most cases, for most restraints, you need at least 2 people for restraint. So we're trained on what's called CPI, which is Crisis Prevention and Intervention. And essentially it's just a myriad of restraint techniques. And these restraint techniques are implemented to be the least invasive. The least invasive as possible, so we're not applying our weight on top of them. Like you see, I think in most cases, people see, like, when they think restraint, they think of maybe a police officer arresting somebody, and you see those crazy videos of like the knee on the back and knee on the neck. Like, I grew up watching Cops, and it was like pretty brutal back in the day. For like classic Cops, it was pretty brutal. They didn't really play by the book or play by the rules. But for us, it's only by the book, only by the rules, and you can't deviate from that. And if you do feel at risk, then usually call the police. And that's the course of action in most cases. Is if you do feel like you can't handle it, and typically you'll announce, I'm abandoning, and so I've seen that in some cases where somebody abandons a restraint and they go, I'm not even trying because I'm gonna get my ass kicked. And then they call the police, or they try to get another staff member, and they try to team up. And because, like, I've been to houses where there's 6'5", 220-pound men who are atypical autistic or autistic in general, and they don't know their own strength, and they're working with tiny women, and they just get, like, beat up on. And it's like, holy cow, like, this is brutal. And then you have to jump in and try to help them, try to save them. And in most cases, it just doesn't result in a great scenario for anybody. It's not safe for the client because you can't half-ass a restraint. You know, you need to do it by the book. You need to make sure that, you know, everything's being followed. So sometimes it's just best to call the police and have them handle it, which we hope it doesn't escalate to that. For me, it's never escalated to that, but I've also seen in some cases, like I have a million stories, so I'll try not to ramble, but I've seen in, you know, a lot of cases where I used to work in a day program. So like I said, I've done every position. I've worked in day programs. I've worked everywhere. A day program is like a little school setting. So after you turn 21, special needs, they go to day programs.
Okay.
And so I worked at a day program, and this girl who was doing like a placement, I think from Carleton, and she was this tiny little girl, I think maybe 5'6". You know, probably $120 soaking wet on a good day. And this girl, this other woman who was a client, but she had schizophrenia, and I work with a bunch of schizophrenics here. She took a water bottle, like a metal water bottle filled with water. It must have weighed like 5 pounds, 10 pounds, and just hit her in the back of the head with her, knocked her out cold.
Wow.
She was never the same afterwards. Same with, clients attacking people with rakes. I've seen some brutal stuff, and some people who got injured on the job and never returned, and they were never been the same. Yeah, it's tough.
Oh.
Speaking of like Dallas, you say you're like a grizzled veteran. Your own words. Like at the start, was it a struggle to at when you're not at work to like shut your brain off and like not think about work, and were you able to like go to bed at night and not like did you ever have a little bit of anxiety when you started in this profession?
Yeah. I think in my first year I cried in my pillow once. And I think I was like 21, so pretty old to be crying in your pillow. But listen, like I boiled over. At the time I was working with the worst. I shouldn't say the worst. We try not to speak in like negative terminology when we're talking about the job, but I would say the most challenging client I've ever worked with at the time. And I was just over encumbered. It was just too much. I was dealing with like countless restraints every day. His restraint protocol was the most invasive I've ever dealt with. We were handcuffing his hands to his belt, putting a helmet on him, putting mittens on him, you know, throwing him into a padded room, giving him 4 different types of depressants to calm him down. And then finally we would do a suppository where we would literally hold him down, pull off his pants, and put a PRN, as it's called, which is just a nurse or doctor terminology for prescribed as needed. And we would put that PRN, which was, I think, trazodone or something, which is just a depressant, put it up his rectum, and that would immediately dissolve into the bloodstream and calm him down. So when you're 21 and you're dealing with that on a daily basis, you bring it home and you yell at your parents, or you get into fights at school or at a bar. You know, you do bad things, but you immediately learn on your feet, and you learn it's either sink or swim. I chose to swim, and I left all the childish behavior of displacing, you know, back when I first started, and I decided to embrace the sublimation, you know, afterwards. Just give me 2 seconds. I think somebody needs a medication or something.
Yeah, no worries.
There's no way in hell I could do this profession, just in terms of like, I'd just be thinking about work too much at home, and like,
I think
it's mentally tough.
Yeah, Matt, that's a great point, but I think it's the same for a lot of professions in the healthcare field or in policing. I don't think people give, and not to teeter off on a completely different subject, you know, completely different trajectory, but I don't think people give police officers, for example, enough credit. And I've never been a police officer. I really don't know what it's like. I've also never been a criminal, so I don't know what it's like. But that's somebody who deals with, and we'll speak in the most basic of terminology because I think it's the simplest way. That's somebody that deals with the most negativity on a regular basis, which is what I was dealing with. I was dealing with just negativity after negativity, you know, just negative experiences, nothing beneficial about them. that client I was working with was atypical autistic. That was what he was diagnosed with. There was no getting better. There was no rehabilitating. There was just maintaining his motor skills, his motor functioning skills. You know, placing a triangle shape into a triangle hole. You know, for example, having him bounce on a trampoline, taking him out on walks. You know, and that was a case where he wasn't admitted by, you know, the ministry or by the government. His parents just couldn't deal with him. He would attack his mom every time he would see him. So to see the depression on his parents' face when they would come visit him, and she comes to say hi to her kid, her only son, and he attacks her, and he babbles and screams at the window, and that's her kid, and she has a completely high-functioning daughter, and, you know, they have no disabilities, you know, in the history of the family. It was just a one-off. To see the depression of the parents, which is something you deal with a lot, is like you get to see the parents in most cases, and to see them and how they cope with it, it's just constant negativity. And I think for doctors as well, I mean, like dealing with somebody who's dying of cancer, or you know, or diagnosing somebody with, you know, the HIV virus, you know, like how do you deal with that afterwards? How do you cope with that? I think there's tons of different strategies, and I think that's the great question, is like, how do you deal with it? For me personally, it's exercise, it's social life, it's disconnecting, leaving it at home, not talking about work once I'm at home or once I'm out of work. Getting enough vitamin D. So I take supplements. I take vitamin D, fish oil, vitamin C, making sure my vitamins are good. Good diet, clean diet. I don't drink milk. I don't take artificial sugar or cane sugar or any sucrose. I don't eat bread. I don't eat pasta. I don't drink pop. So, you know, all of these attributes, all of these virtues that you can encompass to make you a better person is really the only way to survive. Otherwise, you just give in to all of these vices, and it just takes over your life, and you start to feel like quitting, you know? Yeah.
Perfectly said, Dallas. I'll just throw in there really quickly there, and like over the last month, I've also cut out like bread and sugar, and I feel much better. So if anyone out there is kind of struggling with like getting into a good rhythm, like for proper eating, or just like to help your mental state too, like cutting a few of those vices out, like you said, that it actually really makes a difference. Just throw that in there.
Yeah.
I do want to add though, also like more on like your works topic there. Like you mentioned, like now your day to day is a little not as rough as it was when you were 21. Like what's the day to day like? I know you alluded to it a little earlier there, but what are your day to day activities like now, and like what are your hours like while you're at the group home? Are you there the crack of dawn to like late at night, or like what is that like for you?
So the burden continues because the next hardship is that it's a lot like nursing and a lot like any other healthcare profession. It's shift work. So I'm not sure if you can see behind me, but there's a bed.
Okay.
That's because we sleep here sometimes, because we have to. It's called a sleeper shift. And then there's also a person upstairs called the OVA, overnight awake. And, you know, it's like rolling the dice. Sometimes you get snake eyes, sometimes you get gangbusters. And sometimes you end up with an OVA in that week, and you got to stay up all night. And then sometimes you got to work the next day too. Yesterday, for example, I worked 15 hours, 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. And that's a commonality, right? So my contract is, I'm a key worker, so I'm, you know, salaried, and I'm doing 40 hours a week. And how you make up that 40 hours is up to your supervisor. You know, if she goes, hey, yeah, you're working all weekend this week. Or if she says, oh, you know what, you're just doing, you know, 2 15-hour shifts back to back, you know, and then 1 10-hour shift later on the week, then that's how the cookie crumbles. You know, you have no choice about it. Sometimes, depending on the supervisor, you can work out a schedule if you have kids, you know. But I have no kids, so I have really no excuse other than I'm in school. So my supervisor gives me, the time off for my classes, but that's about it. Otherwise, I'm at work. And the day to day, it's pretty routine, and you know, that's pretty normal. I think that's the best word to sum it up, is routine. It's like a prison, or you know, not to make it seem like a prison. It's not. The whole reason for group homes was to escape the institution. But it's very routine. So everything's very habitual. Everybody knows the routine, and that's actually very productive. And it's easier for especially people with autism, and just consistency and knowing what to expect. And I think that's the same with everybody. Just knowing what to expect and having that routine. So you get up and you know exactly what you have to do, your chores, etc. And just maintaining, the routine and making sure everybody's doing what they need to do. And then administering the medication at the appropriate time. And then also staff make the dinners as well. So yeah, there's tons of stuff that comes up throughout the day. Like they have a doctor's appointment, or you have to take this client to work. But most of the day is just kind of, hanging around, observing, what behaviors are being enacted throughout the day, and yeah, just making sure everybody sticks to routine.
Okay. Just to add on the routine, and again, I'll talk about myself really briefly here. The last few days, I've actually, after my work, my shift is done at 4. I've written out during my lunchtime tasks I want to get done during the evening, and assigning time slots for each of these things. So from 4 to 4:40, I'm working out. 4:40 to 5:30 is dinner. I'm not going to go on until I go to bed there, but essentially with a little wiggle room in there. I don't want to be too rigid there, still live in the moment and stuff. But by giving a specific time for a certain activity, I got everything done. Bang, 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 just quick things. And it's like a little life hack I'm just throwing in there as well. Helps with productivity.
I completely agree. Yeah, 100%, Eric. I completely agree. Having a routine outside of work as well is another, what Matt said, 101 how to survive group home life. That's essential, is having an outside routine of something you can stick to, and having those habits where you're just able to put yourself on autopilot, and you get up and you just know exactly what you have to do. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. There's no questioning, should I do this? Should I do that? It's, for me personally, for the last 5 years, I've had the exact same thing for breakfast and lunch. And I just get up and I know exactly, the vitamins I have to take, vitamin D, calcium, B, etc. Trust me, there's a lot, magnesium. I could go on. But I don't take any funny stuff, though. No Arnold Schwarzenegger stuff. But yeah, and then I have an orange, I have a banana, and I have a cup of nuts, mixed Colorado Spring Trail mix. And for me, it's just nice. It's just nice to, know your routine. You get up, it's maybe your grandfather, would always get up and read the news and, break up the newspaper, have a cup of coffee. It's just nice. It's what they do, you know who they are, it's rather than always having to guess what to do and what's next. It's it's nice to settle down.
For sure. The only thing with that, though, is that when you travel, which I know that you do, you stick to that routine. Is the banana, orange, and Colorado Trail mix, are they making the trip as well?
Normally, yeah,
okay.
They do make the trip. But I'm not I don't have OCD or anything.
Okay.
I'm flexible. When I went to Spain, and I frequent Spain a lot. I've been 4 times. A lot of bread, a lot of pasta. Yeah. Not a big bread or pasta guy. But hey, if my girlfriend's mom makes a beautiful bocadillo, which is just like a sandwich, then yeah, okay, I can't deny the bocadillo.
Not gonna disrespect the mother-in-law
not gonna disrespect.
No,
of course, I'm eating it. You put it on my plate, yeah, it's going in my stomach for sure.
Okay, good stuff.
That I can relate to.
Yeah.
Are there any, other than exercising and everything you mentioned, Dallas, any other hobbies that you have that it's your time away from work, and you don't? I know you must not have a lot of spare time right now with school, right? I don't even know how you squeeze in your full-time job, school,
it's impressive.
Social life. It's impressive. I mean, rigid scheduling probably, right? Is the key.
You should see my spreadsheet. Yeah, it's insane.
Glad you could squeeze this in. That's your schedule, man. You had to go on the calendar 4 weeks in advance. That's why.
Yeah.
What are you
but yeah, my other activities, my extracurriculars, like you guys, big movie buff, big cinephile. I love movies, almost to the point where it's a maladaptive behavior, because it's so easy to just get wrapped up in like, oh my gosh, I need to binge watch all of Tarantino's, or I need to binge watch all of Christopher Nolan's. It's so easy to just like get wrapped up even in a genre like blaxploitation or kung fu. So for me, I try to balance out like at least like a movie a week or something, and I'll write a real good disconnect for me is writing a good review about a movie. I have 24 followers, I think, on Letterboxd, and I know you guys, participated in the Letterboxd phenomenon at one point in your lives. But yeah, I think I have 25 followers maybe. None of them like my reviews. Out of the 25, I don't know if they don't see them. I don't know what happens, but I never get a single like on my reviews. And I've written over, I think, 120 reviews now at this point.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot. You should check them out.
Man,
they're not bad.
I'll re-download Letterboxd and toss you some likes. That's disrespectful right there. Because I know the struggle too. I wrote like pretty long reviews too, and like I would get a couple likes, no big deal. But I also had like 9 followers there, so there's good odds I'll get 1 or 2. But yeah,
great odds. Yeah, and so that's the thing. So I mean, I just write reviews, and that's a great way for me to completely disconnect. Like I'll read about the movie's backstory, its production, its reception, its budget, its ROI, return on investment. How well it did in the box office versus its budget. I'll really dive into it, and for me, that's a great escape. Honestly, like my reviews are very in depth. Usually, I throw a couple jokes in there. I try to keep the mood light. But to no avail, I get 0 likes. My girlfriend likes every single review, but I think it's just because she feels bad for me. Other than that, exercise, sports, play Ottawa Footy Sevens. I normally frequent the beer league and the hockey pool.
Nice.
I bike with my girlfriend. I used to do boxing. I don't do boxing anymore. It just takes way too much time and effort. That is a dedicated sport, so you do have to really apply yourself. But I still, box with myself. I still, keep my chops up. But yeah, exercise. I exercise 5 days a week, and like, pretty consistently. Like I definitely make some progress. But it's all about hitting flow state. Obviously, for us, a hobby. 85% rule, if you want to go by Hugh Jackman, or the 80-20 rule. So there's tons of different approaches to hitting flow state. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with flow state, but it's all about not burning out versus zero productivity. So it's just in the middle.
Sweet spot.
Yeah. So do that a little bit. What else? Movies. No video games. Don't have time. But yeah, I don't know what else. Psychology, honestly. Like school for me is a great disconnect. Like I love study. I love reading my textbook. It's really interesting to me. I'll read a chapter, and then that night I'll be talking about it with my girlfriend at dinner, and I'll be saying like, oh my gosh, this new concept that I learned, how it applies to everyday life, and how it can be beneficial. Talking about neurology and talking about the Hebbian learning rule, how we learn things, how we develop new synapses, synaptic pruning, how we remove old synapses and different things. So I think that's just my disconnect for sure. It's just I think it was Jack Dempsey who had the quote where he said, by throwing myself into different things, I forget to worry. And that was one of the greatest boxers of all time, heavyweight boxer, heavyweight champion, within the Roaring 20s, the Manasseh Mahler. And that's a guy who had a lot of pressure on him. He was coming after, he was boxing after Jackson, after Willard, and he was just this tiny guy from Colorado, and all of a sudden took the country by storm. And he said that, I just throw myself into different interests, and that's how I forget to worry. Movement relieves tension. So as long as you just keep yourself doing something, you're too busy to think about the negativity.
Yeah.
Action is the enemy of thought.
There we go.
Oh, very good. Who's that from?
No, I heard that in the movie, actually.
Okay.
Really obscure movie, and that quote's always stuck with me. It was a bad movie, but I always remember, I think it was an Anthony Hopkins movie, and he said that in the movie, and I'm like, I'm never forgetting that because it's so true. That's how I like at work, I'm always moving and doing stuff because I don't want to start like thinking about. I'm like a classic overthinker and suffered from anxiety back in the day, so I always try to like be doing something.
Yeah, no, it's insane. Like you develop all these coping mechanisms, chewing gum, listening to music, finding something to relieve the tension by constantly moving and doing something. So yeah, to your point, Matt, to dovetail that, definitely, it's just fantastic to always be active.
Yeah. And they say the day you stop learning is the day you die. Don't know who said that. Just came to me naturally. Just add on to these quotes there.
Add on to the quotes.
I had to come up with something there. But no, it is important like to always be like putting yourself into like different areas. Or I love like always learning new things. Like I took up plant care in 2020. Like now we got our little garden going. I just started, get those peppers in the ground before the last frost. And posted on Instagram a few days ago there, like I did an oil painting with my uncle for the first time. I had literally zero artistic abilities when it comes to visual arts, and like really happy with the turnout. So it is possible to develop skills, and I thought of that as like an impossible skill to learn. Like I'm, like I said, happy with how it turned out. So it is important to keep putting yourself in these different situations where like you might have a little interest, but maybe you're not sure about if you have what it takes. So just take that leap of faith and give it your all, and you might develop a new hobby. In Dallas, one hobby that you didn't list that I was kind of going to ask you about is if you read or not, what you do with school, but I can definitely see you picking up reading just for fun once you graduate. Like you're definitely going to continue to learn in your field just as a hobby.
Well, in between semesters, you do have some downtime. You have about like a month in between semesters. So, and I'm trying to graduate as fast as possible, so I'm taking summer terms as well. So, yeah, so you definitely, get a very small amount of time in between, but it's definitely important to keep up your chops and keep reading and keep that momentum. And not just for like that purpose, but I enjoy reading as well. And a couple books I can recommend is Sapiens by Yuval Noah Harari, which is just an amazing book that encompasses just everything about who we are as a genome. And then Civilization and Its Discontents by Sigmund Freud. And then my most recent outing to chapters was to acquire Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, written by Quentin Tarantino. And that was an amazing read, fantastic read. And essentially what it is it's just a continuation of the movie starring Margot Robbie, Leonardo DiCaprio, and of course Brad Pitt. And that was just a fantastic read. It literally just gives you all those deleted scenes that you've been dying to see, about Cliff and Rick Dalton. It's a fantastic read. And Quentin Tarantino, he is more than anything a writer. Yeah. So reading for sure, big time, love it. But yeah, you're right. I do read a lot in the textbook. I definitely keep my nose deep in that thing, but and it's tough during school to mix subjects and to read into like the movie genre or something like that. It's just good to stay consistent. So I generally don't read extracurricular books during the semester, but in between, I get right into Rich Dad Poor Dad or Richest Man in Babylon. Yeah, big time.
Get right on. No, I'll definitely check out like Sapiens for sure. Now you're like the third person to recommend it to me in like a short span of time. So just re-upped my library card. So I'll be snagging that thing upon my next visit there for sure.
Yeah, it's an amazing. For me, I would say it's life changing.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
And I'm not exaggerating. Like I don't know. It's just like it opens your mind up to so much.
No, I've had that book recommended before. Like Eric, like I need to get on it.
Yeah.
I'm not reading anything right now, so.
Audible, if you guys are working a lot and you guys have downtime during work, Audible I've heard is a great avenue, great conduit for audiobooks and digesting books without having to sit down and finding a quiet place to read or anything. So,
yeah, that's a good call. Any movies to recommend, Dallas? Like we focus on your letterbox writing, not necessarily
we
the
have
movies
time.
you're writing about. Just like a couple of recommendations you want to fire off. Anything you've seen recently? Thoughts on anything new?
Recently, the last movie I saw was Shogun Assassin. That was fantastic. If you guys are familiar with Afro Samurai meets,
Kind of, vaguely, just through like rap music, basically. I've never seen those movies though.
Well, yeah, it's this like solo Ronin, who kind of. Anyway, I'll let you guys experience it for yourself. I'm not gonna give you. Well, it does have my guaranteed stamp of approval on Letterboxd, but so that speaks for itself. But High Plains Drifter. Oh,
there
you
go.
Matt. Yeah. So Matt knows exactly what I'm talking about. It's such a classic. It's such a fantastic outing to see, just like something that is not poetic in any way. It's literally just a slasher, like a guy kicking ass and taking names. It's so badass, bad to the bone, in fact. And then some good recommendations. Well, I'll try to be topical because Shogun Assassin is such a blast from the past. The Batman was fun. I saw that in theaters. That was a intense experience. I loved what Matt Reeves did with Gotham to make it so dark and depraved. I had never seen Gotham in that way. Not from Christopher Nolan, not from Zack Snyder. Zack Snyder touched on it a little bit, but it was just so dark in Matt Reeves' realm. So I thought the Batman was cool. Obviously, it had some detracting factors, but it's pretty tough when you're automatically sizing it up against Christopher Nolan's. And then I saw Death on the Nile. That was interesting, but I'm hoping that just works into, because obviously Death on the Orient Express was such a success, and it essentially gave Kenneth the funding he needed for Belfast, which I thought was really awesome too. If you're a guy with an Irish heritage like I am, it's something to kind of escape into and be like, oh wow, this is what Ireland was like. So Belfast is good. The Batman, good. Death on the Nile, fun date movie. Take your girlfriend, take your wife, boyfriend, whoever, partner, and check it out for sure. It's fun. It's fun to guess, who's the killer, etc. My biggest recommendation, I think, would have to be High Plains Drifter. High Plains Drifter, directed by Clint Eastwood, starring Clint Eastwood. Now that movie is action-packed, fun as well, dark, but also it has like a hidden meaning within it, which you need to discover for yourself. So to really determine what's real and what's not, and what the ending means. So that's something that's really, really fun to chew on. Yeah.
Okay, good combo platter of recommendations there, Dallas. I've wanted to check out Belfast there, so I'll definitely check that one out. And like High Plains Drifter, never heard of it. Matt, I'm assuming you've seen it.
Oh yeah, I love Clint Eastwood and westerns and my biggest takeaway from High Plains Drifter was like what Clint Eastwood's character does at the beginning. Like it's not like you said, dark. It's really good.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I think we all remember that haystack scene.
That's what, yeah, and it
sticks with you.
I don't want to give too much away, but like there's some horror elements to the movie in terms of like, I don't want to say the word because then it's gonna like could be a spoiler, but there's different interpretations of the movie too. So, anyways,
yeah. Exactly. That's the fun part is like, you get to debate afterwards with the people who you just watched it with, and you're like, well, does this mean that? And does that mean this? And you get to really talk about, and those are the best types of movies for me, are the movies where you really afterwards get to talk about it. Instead of just coming out of a movie and being like, oh, that was cool, that was action packed, but there's nothing really to digest or divulge,
Well, I was going to ask you, Dallas, about a movie that's kind of cool and also has, there's some questions up in the air, up for a dissection, if you will. I just rewatched Dunne for the first time since seeing it in theaters. What were your thoughts on that movie?
Directed by another Canadian legend, Denis Villeneuve, who directed one of my favorite movies of all time. Prisoners, right? Did he do Prisoners?
Yep.
Yeah, Prisoners was just incredible.
I thought you were gonna say Ace on Z for a second there, but
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
I love Prisoners.
Oh, that movie was insane.
Yeah.
That was insane. Does 1 + 1 equal 2? Oh my gosh, that was incredible. What a great catch there. And then also The Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal.
Yep.
Or was it The Enemy? Which is The Enemy,
yeah,
right?
Enemy with Jake Gyllenhaal. Yep.
And so anyway, Dune. I thought Timothée Chalamet's outing was fantastic. I'm a big Chalamet fan, to be honest. You know, he was amazing in which is it, Beautiful Boy. I haven't seen Call Me by Your Name yet, but I'm being told it's also a fantastic performance by Chalamet. So he's fantastic in it, and I'm not sure if you guys have read the book, but I have.
Yep.
And it's a massive realm.
Mm-hmm.
It's a big world to build, you know. So it's tough for Villeneuve to build that world in such a short span, especially when he knows he's fighting to get the funding for a sequel. You know, so he needs to kind of pick up the pace fast and skip over a lot of the minute details, you know, that encompass the realm of Dune. But I thought for what it was such an impressive enhancement from David Lynch's Dune. I'm not sure if you guys have seen the original Dune by David Lynch, but it is so dated. Although, you know, the performances are fine, the special effects are atrocious. You know, it's like South Park quality animation at some points. It's so bad. And so, you know, to go from that and you have like that as your standard and then to like expand on it with Villeneuve's, it's so fantastic to finally see that realm really be brought to life with some real funding behind it, you know, some real production. So I'm excited for the sequel. You know, there was nothing that really took away too much. There were like some small details that, you know, I'm sure you guys have talked about it, you know, in your friend groups and stuff. You know, there's some stuff, but don't get hung up on the small details. You know, overall, it was a fantastic experience. Has to be seen in the big screen, though, I gotta say.
Yeah, agreed.
Couple of quick questions. Your favorite Tarantino movie and Christopher Nolan movie, if that's even possible to answer.
Yeah, I'm a big Tarantino guy. I'm not sure what the Tarantino fans call themselves, Tarantinoites. I'm not sure, but whatever it is, I'm it.
Me too.
That is such a tough one. Tarantino is probably the hardest one to answer for that because, you know, yeah, honestly, Reservoir Dogs was so fantastic, but Pulp Fiction was just, especially like if you also include the fact of like just how expansive it was in the era that it came out in. Like nobody was doing film like Tarantino did with Pulp Fiction, so it was so unique for the era. So I'm gonna have to give you like a crappy answer and kind of like include like maybe two tied, but I'll just say like. It's impossible. Like Inglourious Basterds, Django Unchained, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and Pulp Fiction, in my opinion, are masterpieces. I've watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at least 6 times, Pulp Fiction 10 times, Django Unchained 5 times, Inglourious Basterds probably double. So it's like I could pick apart each movie and what makes it perfect, but I'll just give you, you know, like if you put a gun against my head, I'll say Inglourious Basterds. And if you ask me why, I could go on, but it's mainly due in part to Christoph Waltz's iconic character. That's a part that will never be seen again. It's just something that's so unique, somebody who is such a fantastic linguist. And that was Christoph Waltz's like starring role, like his breakout role.
Yeah.
I think everything considered, it just makes that movie so incredible. And Matt, I got so wrapped up. Oh yeah, Christopher Nolan, right? I'd have to say The Dark Knight. Yeah, I think the writing on that is just impeccable. I don't think you can beat the writing. Like, so he took a superhero who on a piece of paper is a goofball, a rich playboy who dresses up as a bat and goes and punches people in the face, essentially, and solves crimes. On paper, it sounds ridiculous. If you saw somebody in real life dressed as a bat, you laugh them out of the street. Like, it would be ridiculous. But he makes it into, like, we're coming from Batman, where it was taken almost in a ridiculous nature, from Adam West, from Ted Burton's directorial outings with the Batman. It was done, like, with kapow and Arnold Schwarzenegger's iconic line, "What happened to the dinosaurs? The Ice Age," and then he freezes everybody. It's so campy, it's so cheesy, because it's an ode to the comics. But then you have Christopher Nolan, who comes out with this dark, grimy, very tangible character that is Batman. And then you have, of course, the late, why am I blanking on his name right now? But Heath Ledger, yes, the late Heath Ledger as the Joker. That was just somebody who clearly absorbed the role, did not take it lightly, and gave us something. Who, once again, a guy who dresses like a clown. It's just kind of, on paper, it sounds weird, but then you see it brought to life, and in that way, it was such a great combination of, like, comic meets real world reality, and everything was explained, everything was believable. I think for those reasons, The Dark Knight is my favorite Christopher Nolan.
So many good points, Dallas. And just like kind of to wrap this Dark Knight conversation up there, Matt and I had a little debate about whether or not The Dark Knight belongs in the greatest movies of all time conversation. Just want to get your input, yes or no. Do you think it belongs in that conversation?
I think it already is. I think if you go on IMDb...
that was a contentious topic, that it's like number 3 all time on IMDb, but do you think it should be put up against these like great dramas of all time?
Well, pardon my friend, if I can just speak on the International Movie Database for a few seconds. If I could wipe my ass, pardon the French, with IMDb and Rotten Tomatoes, I would. Those ratings mean close to nothing to me. I judge a movie based off of the reviews from people who I trust and their opinions. But the saturated market of online movie reviews is to be taken like a grain of salt. It's a drop in a bucket. But yes, 100% it deserves to be in the top, would you say top 5?
Just greatest movies of all time. But yeah, I could see top 5 for sure.
Well, yeah, top 5, that's tough. That's a big argument. That's a big debate for sure. But for sure, one of the greatest movies of all time. I mean... How can you seamlessly transform such a campy character and bring him to real life in such a believable way? I mean, I believed he could exist when I saw that movie. I believed this could be a reality, versus something that I clearly just saw was depicted off of a comic book. It was somebody who I looked up to. The writing was inspirational. It was something you could really grab onto and use in your daily life to inspire you. And others. It was something that just hit me in my soul and my being. And yeah, I'll never forget that movie, and I'll watch it probably once a year.
Sign of a great movie when it hits you in your soul. Come on, let's go.
It's a great
well
movie.
Said, Dallas.
It's a great movie. I just put 1,000 movies ahead of it. That's all. Like that was my point on that episode. Like,
that's the thing, and it's like, Matt, you're completely on base. You're shooting par, because there are 1,000 incredible greatest movies of all time. It's like, to say the greatest movie of all time, it's like saying you're the heavyweight championship of the world. Let's be honest. In 5 years, it's going to be a different guy. It's a constantly evolving thing. So yeah, like it's a huge market, for me personally, and like movies, like all movies, they're subjective. So some movies are gonna hit somebody specifically deeper than others. Like clearly for me, it hit home. But I grew up with comic books. I grew up with Batman. I always looked up to superheroes. I grew up watching Justice League on the TV before going to school, and so Batman for me was next to the Holy Father, so.
Anyways,
I
we don't
guess
need to get into it anymore. They're
really,
just curious as to what you thought about it. Seeing as you're also a cinephile and you write reviews on Letterboxd that are going to start getting more likes now that we've built this movement up for you. I'm back on there now.
Thank you. Wow. Yeah.
Dallas, what is your letterbox, by the way? Let's get this out.
It's
Yeah.
just it should just be Dallas Dunne, I think.
One
it's
word.
Just my name.
Your name.
Dallas Dunne. And yeah, don't feel obligated to like my reviews. I don't do it for the likes. I don't do it for the people. I do it for my own selfish need to escape from reality. So yeah, Letterboxd for me is just fun. I read some other reviews. I find out about a lot of movies through Letterboxd that I haven't even heard of. Going through other people's lists and stuff like that. And I think it's a great app. I think it's really fun. It's a lot better than the other apps I see out there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have Instagram. I barely have Facebook. I was very surprised to learn that I had this Facebook account that I made when I was 13 about my cat. Embarrassing, but
Shout
it
out
is what
Tinker.
it is. Yeah, Tinker. Yeah. I'm not a big social media guy. Like I said, I don't have a lot of time. But
If it
Letterboxd
wasn't
is
for the
something
pod, I
always
feel like
fun.
I'd be off social media, to be honest. But like, it is good
Really?
to connect with people. Like for hockey, like I run my beer league hockey team. Like I gotta get the times out to the boys, and just connect with friends. Like get guests on the pod, and it's such a valuable tool to have. But yeah, I do think I wouldn't be on as much if we didn't do the pod.
Yeah, and also I think it's a great marketing tool for
Yeah,
the pod
exactly.
as well. I think it gets it out to the people. It's the modern day town crier. So it's a fantastic avenue to just release your pod out to the populace and have them eat it up, as I know they do, because Easy Conversations is taking the world by storm.
One step at a
so-
time, brick
Step
by
at a time,
brick.
brick by brick. Yeah.
Good stuff. Might be a good spot to wrap it up. Do you have anything else for him, Matt?
No, I was just gonna say, like, are we gonna do like a round of random recommendations or?
Yeah, I think we can. We didn't last time there. So, yeah, Dallas, I mean, we could shut it down now. Matt and I are going to do another segment afterwards. But, yeah, man, it's been absolutely awesome to have you on here. Extremely informative and very well spoken. It was really fun to learn about the field that you're in. And, yeah, I mean, thanks a lot for joining us. Matt, any final thoughts for Dallas?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Dallas, for coming on. I actually learned this might be the episode where I've learned the most. Like, you were very it was very educational for me, and the time went by so fast. Could have listened to you for another 3 hours because it was all brand new to me. It was all brand new to me, right? And I was learning a lot, and I love learning. So, thank you so much.
You're welcome. If I can just say, it was an absolute pleasure and honor to be on the pod. I've been itching to get on. Hope to be on again. And Eric, it's always a fantastic time seeing you.
Absolutely.
You're a fantastic guy, and I just absolutely love what you guys are doing with this podcast. And I just wish you both the best.
Thanks, Dallas. Really appreciate that. And yeah, hopefully next time we get you on, we'll be in person too.
Yeah, I love in person. Okay, have a great Thursday. Take care.